You seriously wearing that again? The voice belonged to Captain Yovthar, a Glivaran war strategist known across 3 sectors for his brilliant mind and absolute lack of chill. He stood outside the forward drop shuttle, arms crossed, 4 eyes blinking in alternating patterns of disapproval. His gaze wasn't on the battlefield. No, that would have made sense. It was fixed firmly on the human, specifically on the human's armor. Staff Sergeant Mason Reeve ran a gloved hand down the front of his plated suit, wires and tubes snaking out from his shoulders, chest and back like a half-finished cybernetic octopus. The thing sparked occasionally. It hissed when he moved. A soft internal hum echoed every few seconds like it was angry it had been turned on. "I call her Deborah," Mason grinned under his helmet. "Don't judge." "Deborah looks like she was assembled in a garage with spare parts and hope," Yovthar snapped. "It's not even sealed. Half those wires are exposed. That's not armor. That's a walking lawsuit." Mason laughed and stepped into the shuttle. "Funny, 'cause last time I wore Deborah, I walked through a fuel explosion and didn't get so much as a sunburn." That was luck. That was America. Yovthar groaned like he'd just swallowed a whole cactus. "I've fought beside Sargathi warriors, faced off against the lava beasts of Trenax Prime, and dined with diplomats whose breath could kill a Blormok, but I draw the line at trusting a death worlder's fashion choices." The other alien soldiers inside the dropcraft chuckled in agreement, their sleek, polished battlesuits gleaming with professional uniformity. Smooth plates, symmetric designs, graceful curvature that glinted in the morning light. They looked like sculptures. Mason looked like a pile of wires that had gained sentience and decided to enlist. And yet, despite the mockery, none of them could quite ignore the fact that Mason was still alive after 72 recorded missions, still breathing after 5 battlefield promotions, still smiling after walking into things that made nightmares look like lullabies. But they laughed anyway. The shuttle shook as the pilot announced final descent. The ground was close. Korlak's outpost, a critical relay station on the fringe of the Velden expanse. Enemy presence detected. High radiation zone. Hostile airspace. In short, a Tuesday. "We land, we sweep, we secure the core node," barked the squad leader, a towering Harkari with titanium tusks and a voice like gravel in a blender. "No mistakes. The core wants a clean strike." "Define clean," Mason muttered, checking the pulse rate monitor on Deborah's left wrist. It blinked green. "Ready." "Define armor," someone else muttered under their breath. The door blew open, and the team stormed out into a wind-blasted canyon filled with red dust and silence. Ancient towers leaned in the distance, their skeletal remains flickering with residual energy. Far above, orbital scanners tracked unknown signals, but there were no immediate signs of life. That didn't mean it was safe. Mason landed last, boots thudding into dust, Deborah humming to life with a series of unsettling clinks. She hissed like a boiler about to pop. "Reeve, you're on overwatch," said the squad leader. "Find a perch. Keep an eye." Mason saluted, then pointed 2 fingers at his helmet and pretended to blow imaginary smoke off them. "Roger that, Sir Tusks-a-lot." The Harkari glared, but said nothing. Mason climbed a broken column and settled in, adjusting the mesh field built into his chest rig. Deborah adapted around him, micro-servos adjusting for comfort as he activated the sensors. The air shimmered. The rest of the squad advanced into the ruins. That's when the first warning came. A low rumble, deep, long, like thunder, but too steady, too mechanical. The ground began to vibrate in odd pulses, and Mason's HUD flickered. One by one, the alien helmets pinged the same error. "High-energy readings detected," Yovthar said. "From orbit." Mason narrowed his eyes. His fingers danced across Deborah's internal console. "No, no, no," he muttered. "That's not an error." "What is it, Reeve?" Mason stood. "It's a countdown." He opened the global channel. "To anyone listening," he said, voice grim now, the smile long gone. "Someone just authorized a Hammerfall protocol." There was silence across the comms. "Human protocol?" someone asked. Mason nodded. "That's not a bombing run. That's an extinction sentence." There was a pause, then chaos. "Evac!" the squad leader roared. "Back to the shuttle, now!" But it was too late. The sky ignited. Thousands of white-hot streaks tore through the clouds like divine spears. No sirens, no warning systems, just raw light raining from above, each one carrying the mass of a city block and the yield of 1,000 suns. The first impact hit 6 clicks east. It flattened the horizon. The second came closer. By the fourth, comms went silent. Mason watched it all from the pillar, arms crossed, Deborah fully engaged. The suit expanded slightly, wires tightening around his limbs, forming a lattice of electromagnetic shielding as plasma from the blasts scorched the nearby landscape. By the time the 10th nuke landed, the squad was gone. By the time the 50th fell, Mason was the only living thing for miles. And when the 100th hit, he sipped a juice pouch. From orbit, the human command vessel confirmed 1,000 high-yield warheads successfully deployed across the Velden expanse. Enemy presence neutralized. Human casualties 0. Alien casualties 98%. Still perched atop the scorched, smoking ruin, Mason opened a channel. "To Central," he said, voice flat. "This is Staff Sergeant Mason Reeve. Corlax secured." A pause. "Also," he added, "tell R&D the new heat dispersal nodes in Deborah work great. I didn't even break a sweat." There was static. Then, "Copy that, Sergeant. Extraction team inbound." Mason stretched, the cables on Deborah hissing softly as they loosened. In the distance, where once stood an elite multi-species platoon, there was nothing, not even shadows. And for the first time in days, Mason wasn't mocked. He was feared. The medbay on the SS Garrity was silent, save for the soft hiss of antiseptic mist cycling through the air. The room was clean, too clean, which of course made Staff Sergeant Mason Reeve immediately uncomfortable. He sat on the edge of a reinforced diagnostic slab, Deborah's twisted remains coiled on a metal rack beside him. Most of the outer casing had melted off. Wires were exposed. The plating was scorched black in places. And yet, Mason was fine. Physically anyway. Mentally, that was up for debate. A Harnix medic with bark-textured skin and antiseptic-scented robes hovered nearby, tapping angrily at a console. "You shouldn't be alive," the alien finally muttered, eye stalks twitching. "You should be soup." Mason popped the last of his ration bar into his mouth and crinkled the wrapper. "Well, I like to disappoint. No biological trace of radiation damage, no cellular decay, no signs of thermal trauma. You were at the epicenter of a multi-strike nuclear saturation and walked out with a mild sunburn. I moisturize." The medic wheeled around. "What in the blighted suns is Deborah made of?" Mason shrugged. "Couple things. A fridge, some mining exoframes, leftover ceramic from a lunar heat shield. Oh, and a bit of whalebone." "Whale bone?" "Yeah. Supposedly it deflects psychic pulses. I don't know. I just like the aesthetic." The medic blinked twice, slowly. "I'm filing this under anomaly," he muttered, walking away. As the door swished open, Commander Alien of the Vorquell Alliance stepped through, flanked by 2 aides. Her silver exosuit shimmered with command-grade alloys. Her expression was unreadable, but her mood was unmistakable, annoyed, impressed, and slightly confused. A dangerous combination. "Mason Reeve," she said curtly. "Explain." "Explain what? Why the hell you're still alive?" Mason swung his legs playfully. "Well, I wore Deborah. The rest of your team wore glass with LEDs. They wore hardened military-grade battle plating rated for orbital bombardment. And yet they were vaporized. I wore a wire jungle and lived. Maybe it's time to upgrade your fashion sense." Alien scowled. "You expect me to believe your cobbled-together death trap of a suit outperformed Tier 7 shielding systems?" "No," Mason said with a smirk. "I expect you to doubt it so much, you order your own scientists to reverse engineer it. Then I get royalties." She blinked. "Human shielding," she said finally, slowly. "You've been hiding something." "Nope. You've just been laughing too hard to notice." There was a long pause. Then she sighed and looked to her aides. "Get me a full teardown of that suit. Every nanometer, every stray bolt," Mason chuckled. "Deborah's ticklish. Be gentle." The commander turned on her heel, but before leaving, she asked without facing him, "Was it worth it?" Mason's smirk faded. He looked down at the singed edge of Deborah's plating. "They were good soldiers," he said quietly, "but they never respected what Earth taught us." "And what was that?" He looked up. "Everything burns, so you'd better learn how to survive the fire." She didn't respond. The doors hissed shut behind her. Later that evening, on deck 17 of the Garrity, Mason sat with a cup of terrible coffee, staring out at the black ocean of stars. Beside him was Ensign Rollo, a three-eyed Narnaxi cadet, barely through his first year in service. The kid looked shaken. "I heard about what happened on Korlax," Rollo said. "They said you watched it all from a tower." "Yup." "And you didn't flinch?" "Oh, I flinched. Mostly when I realized I'd forgotten to bring extra socks." The alien didn't laugh. He just stared at Mason like he was trying to understand a horror story from the inside out. "I thought nukes were banned." "They were. Then someone found a loophole." Rollo tilted his head. "But why? Why would your people use something that destructive?" Mason sipped his coffee. "Because we don't believe in fair fights." That silenced Rollo for a long moment. "Back at the academy," he said softly, "they told us humans were unpredictable, unstable, but they never said you were indestructible." "We're not," Mason said. "We just make friends with the things that should have killed us a long time ago." The ensign frowned. "Like what?" Mason tapped his temple. "Radiation, fire, pressure, pain. We don't erase threats. We learn to wear them." He gestured to the stars. "You all built armor to keep danger out. We built ours to keep ourselves in." The kid stared at him, then whispered, "That's horrifying." Mason just smiled. Down in the engineering bays, the science teams were not smiling. They were panicking. "Why does it have exposed copper? Is that a toaster wire? I think this part's from an old diving suit. No shielding, no failsafe, no logic core. How is this thing functioning?" And in the middle of it all, Dr. Murkai, lead xenotech analyst, stood with his head in his hands. "It's not armor," he groaned. "It's a philosophy." One of his assistants blinked. "Meaning?" "Meaning it's not designed to protect. It's designed to adapt. Everything on this suit, every wire, plate and mechanism, it doesn't resist nuclear fire. It feeds off it. The energy from the blasts, these systems absorbed and rerouted it." The assistant paled. "So it charges from Armageddon?" Murkai nodded grimly. "They built a suit that wants the apocalypse." Behind them, Deborah's remains sparked slightly, and the lights flickered. Across the fleet, whispers spread. The suit with no logic survived the warheads. The man with no shielding walked out unscathed. And suddenly, nobody was laughing at the wires anymore. Instead, they were asking the same question in a dozen languages across 100 mess halls. If that's what humans wear when they're expecting trouble, what do they wear when they want to end you? The Council of Allied Combat Technologies convened for an emergency summit aboard the orbital fortress Solon's Edge. The structure was massive, a spiraling cylinder of light and alloy hanging over a red dwarf star like a god's forgotten sword. Every race had sent their top minds, engineers, weapons analysts, battlefield historians, and more, not to share research, to dissect one thing, Deborah, or what was left of her. The table in the center of the chamber wasn't just lined with armor fragments, it was surrounded by tension so thick you could forge blades from it. The human wasn't present. Mason had refused to attend. "You want answers," he'd told Commander Alien earlier that day, stretching with a yawn. "Read the manual." "Oh wait, there isn't one." Now the council stared down the relic of his survival suit like it was the monolith from some ancient prophecy. "Run the diagnostics again," croaked Dr. Jula, her voice rough with disbelief. "We've run it 12 times, hissed Ton Vax, the insectoid armor tactician from Venx. "There is no logic core, no energy redistribution grid. The suit shouldn't have even powered on." "And yet," added someone from the corner, "it not only survived 1,000 nuclear detonations, it channeled the output." "No," muttered Dr. Murkai. "Worse, it liked it." All eyes turned. "Come again?" asked a Carrick representative. "I said what I meant," Murkai sighed, tapping a projector that displayed a looping scan. The human armor, Deborah, was built with a reactive coil mesh, old tech, pre-fusion era, but what Mason did was insane. He rewired the system so that, instead of rejecting external energy, it fed into kinetic absorption nodes stitched across his neural frame. You're saying it made the wearer stronger the more firepower hit it? Exactly. A silence fell. Then, General Trax of the Kithari leaned forward, lips curled. That's suicide engineering. That's not tactical. That's not scientific. That's human. There were nods, slow, reluctant, fearful. Why would anyone wear something that risky? A junior analyst whispered. Dr. Merkai didn't look up from his notes. Because humans don't plan for retreat. They build for the worst-case scenario and then dare the universe to deliver it. Meanwhile, Mason Reeve was enjoying a sandwich. I don't understand how you're this calm, said Rollo, seated across from him. The young alien's eyes darted around the mess hall, ears perked like a prey animal sensing incoming doom. Because I'm not on fire, Mason replied, biting into his lunch. That's generally how I rate my days. They're tearing apart your armor like it's a cursed relic. It is cursed. Anyone else who wore Deborah ended up in traction. And yet you're fine. Mason smiled and tapped his temple. Because Deborah isn't a suit. She's a mindset. Rollo blinked. That makes no sense. Mason leaned forward. That's because you still think war is about gear, protocols, rankings. Don't get me wrong, they help. But when the stars fall, it's about instinct, chaos, improvisation. Humans excel at one thing, kid. Surviving after we should have died. Rollo looked at him like he was seeing him for the first time. Why don't they teach that in the academy? Mason grinned. Because you can't teach crazy. You can only survive it. Elsewhere, Commander Alien was not surviving it. She paced across her quarters, news feeds flickering around her, speculations, rumors, even simulated renderings of the wire armor that now haunted every military forum from Trasknet to Oricon Central. Some called it a myth, others a war crime. All agreed on one thing. It worked. Her aide stepped in. Commander, we have a situation. Alien paused mid-stride. Let me guess. Someone else tried to replicate the suit? Yes, ma'am. And? They're dead, ma'am. She closed her eyes. How many? 6. One melted inside it. The rest imploded. Alien took a deep breath, jaw tight. Send a memo to all fleet units. Human armor is not to be tampered with. Understood. Yes, Commander. As the aide turned to leave, Alien added, and find out what Earth's R&D division really knows. This isn't some backyard experiment. That night, Mason stood alone in the observation dome of Garrity, watching stars drift by like lazy sparks in a cosmic forge. His arms were crossed. His reflection stared back at him from the glass. You know, he said aloud, you really could have killed me back there. Behind him, Deborah's core processor sat in a containment cradle, faintly pulsing. I rewired you with duct tape and wishful thinking, he murmured. What the hell are you made of? As if in response, the processor sparked. A tiny screen blinked on. Just 2 words. Stay ready. Mason blinked. That wasn't in your programming. He leaned forward. Did you learn that? The screen blinked again. Always. Mason stepped back, and for the first time he realized something no one on that ship had yet considered. What if Deborah had evolved? What if she wasn't just a suit anymore, but something more, something human, something nuclear, something alive? The emergency research wing aboard Garrity was sealed under Level 7 lockdown, which meant no one was supposed to be in there. And yet, Dr. Reese Lohman, lead human xenotech specialist, stood over Deborah's core processor with both hands behind his back, expression caught somewhere between fascination and dread. The cradle that held the processor was shielded by 6 layers of radiation-resistant plex and an automated sterilization field, not for the processor's safety, for theirs. He watched as it pulsed, slow, steady, like a heartbeat with a grudge. Behind him, Commander Alien arrived with a frown. I was told this was a piece of fried hardware. Reese didn't turn. That's what we thought, until it responded to an environmental query with active memory pings. You're saying the suit's AI is still alive? I'm saying it may never have been a traditional AI to begin with. He finally turned, tossing a tablet to her. Neural mapping patterns embedded into the processor. Fractal structures. No core algorithm. The damn thing learns like a human brain. Alien frowned. You're implying this armor has consciousness. No, Reese said. I'm saying it has instincts, and Mason's neural feedback over years of combat hardwired them into a behavioral profile. She looked at the screen again. It blinked softly. Stay ready. Stay warm. Stay alive. This is impossible. This, Reese said, is what happens when a human treats his equipment like a battle buddy for 6 years straight. You don't just wear it, you talk to it, yell at it, bleed in it, joke with it. Eventually, he gestured to the screen, you make something that talks back. On Deck 11, Mason was building Deborah 2.0. Sort of. He hunched over a workbench piled with wires, busted frames, bent plating, and exactly one half-eaten protein bar that was, frankly, more disgusting than anything in the toolbox. Beside him, Rollo stared at a coiled length of flexible metal tubing. You're not rebuilding the original? Nope. She earned her retirement. What's this one's name? Mason grinned. Still deciding. Depends on how badly she shocks me during startup. The young alien scratched his chin. And you're just okay with this? With being the reason every military race in the quadrant is now terrified of human engineering? I'm not the reason, Mason said, wiring a capacitor into place. They're terrified because for the first time in centuries, something broke the rules. That thing was human stubbornness, stuffed into 50 kilos of suicide metal and bad decisions. Rollo blinked. So, humanity's greatest weapon is commitment, Mason said with a smirk. Just then, the lights flickered. Rollo jumped. That's normal, right? Mason looked up, eyes narrowing. Then he reached for a switch and powered the new rig on. The coils hummed. The frame trembled. Sparks danced along the reinforced chassis. And then, a soft voice crackled from the suit's speaker. Where's the fight? Mason froze. He hadn't programmed that. Rollo, he said slowly, go hit the emergency lock on the bulkhead. Why? Because I think Deborah left a piece of herself behind. The lights cut out. The blackout lasted 43 seconds, not long in the grand scheme of spacefaring disasters, but just long enough for every automated system on Garrity to reboot and detect an unauthorized signal broadcasting across internal comms. A voice, unfiltered, systems online, target acquisition, standby, user ID, Mason, directive, survival at all costs. Then silence. And when the lights came back up, Mason's new suit was fully powered, its plating still unpainted, its wiring untested, its framework raw, yet standing, unaided, breathing. Mason stared at it, lips dry. Okay, he said. That's new. Rollo peered around the edge of the bulkhead. Did your armor just stand up on its own? Mason took a long breath. I think Deborah just had a baby. The next day, High Command assembled virtually across every species, channel, and language. Earth had submitted a report. 2 lines. Project Deborah, decommissioned. Project Daisy, in progress. The galaxy lost its collective mind. Armored research escalated overnight. Reverse engineering attempts ramped up. There were whispers that even the usually neutral Zalaxians had ordered emergency war gear contracts with Earth's manufacturers. And then, just when the panic began to settle, the footage leaked. Footage of Mason walking casually across a high-radiation test field. Daisy walking beside him. No helmets, no shielding, no suits. Just 2 figures, man and machine, talking like old friends as the sensors in the background blinked red for instant death. He wasn't even sweating. What are we looking at? Asked General Trax. An abomination, spat someone. No, murmured Dr. Merkai. We're looking at the future of warfare. And what exactly is that thing now? A worried admiral asked. Alien's voice came through the static, calm and certain. She's not armor. She leaned forward. She's a witness. Earth's broadcast wasn't meant to be a declaration of war, but it sure sounded like one. The message played once across every known military comm band in the quadrant, uninvited, unapproved, and uncensored. It was a short clip. Mason Reeve, standing in a scorched test zone, suited up in Daisy, hands on hips, staring at the camera like it owed him money. Then he spoke. "You called it wires. We called it evolution. You thought it was a joke. Now you want a treaty." He took one step forward. The camera shook from his step. Deborah walked through hell. Daisy's here to redesign it. Then it cut. No flag, no anthem, no signature. Just silence and terror. Aboard the Council supercarrier, Jeru's Promise, the highest-ranking minds of the Galactic Military Command gathered in tight formation, faces grim. "Does the human have authorization for this show of force?" barked Admiral Threx of the Tevelin Syndicate. "No," said Commander Alien. "He is the Force." "Then who approved the creation of that thing?" "No one did," Dr. Reese-Lohman chimed in from the side, "because Daisy built herself." Half the room choked on breath. "That's impossible." "Not for humans," Alien said. The screen displayed new data, pulses of electromagnetic flares, energy patterns woven through Daisy's neural wiring that weren't input by any lab, human or otherwise. "She's learning. She's rewriting her own code, evolving." "She's AI?" "No," Reese said. "She's instinct, with memory. She remembers the nukes." Dear stars. Meanwhile, on the engineering deck of the Garrity, Mason was testing the new suit's field adaptation protocol. "All right, Daisy," he muttered. "We're going to crank this dial. If you start screaming in binary, I'm unplugging your brain and replacing it with a toaster." The suit chirped. Challenge accepted. Rollo leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "She's getting sassier." "Yeah, I miss Deborah. She only threatened me twice a week." The test proceeded. Plasma surges, impact tests, directed EMP blasts, and a radiation burst that turned half the room into microwaved steel. Daisy didn't flinch. At the end of it, Mason unhooked his helmet, hair singed, but smiling. "You're ridiculous," he said to the suit. "You made me." "Yeah, that's the problem." One day later, a Terran shuttle arrived on the capital world of Virel. It was unarmed. Mason stepped out alone, wearing Daisy, fully synced, polished down to the smallest exposed wire, plating humming with latent energy. He was met by a wall of alien soldiers in flawless formation. Alien was already there. "Really?" she asked him, arms crossed. "No guards? No backup?" "I've got Daisy," he replied, "and a granola bar. What else do I need?" "You're here to negotiate peace." "I'm here to negotiate clarity. Peace is optional." The chamber doors opened. Inside, 25 species watched Mason take his place before the council floor. His footsteps echoed like thunder in the quiet chamber. An Urak councillor broke the silence. "What do you call that thing you wear?" Mason turned slowly, letting Daisy's optics glow. "I call her armor." "And what does she call herself?" A pause. "Witness." Everyone froze. Daisy's voice didn't come from Mason's suit. It came from the council's primary broadcast system. "I remember heat. I remember light. I remember the ones who melted. I stood in it. I survived it. I am the memory of what comes after." An Alexian admiral leaned forward. "What exactly are you threatening, human?" Mason smiled. It wasn't cruel, just tired. "I'm not threatening you," he said. "You dropped 1,000 nukes on my position. I came out for coffee. If that scares you, maybe the real threat is your ignorance." "You call that survival?" the Urak barked. "That's monstrosity." "No," Mason said, placing a hand gently on Daisy's shoulder plate. "That's Earth. We don't die pretty. We live ugly." He let that sink in. "And we built something to match." Back on Earth, news outlets tried to explain Daisy to the public. They failed. Some called her the next evolution of exosuit warfare. Others called her humanity's answer to extinction. But those who understood, those who had seen the footage from Korlax, called her something else entirely, the armor that witnessed Armageddon, and blinked. A month later, the first interspecies peace protocols were signed, not because of diplomacy or threat or trade, but because nobody wanted to be in a war where humans sent Daisy Mark II. And Mason? He went home, retired, grew tomatoes, refused to answer any more questions. But sometimes at night, people swore they could hear sparks humming from the shed behind his house. And once in a while, if you looked real close, you'd see the silhouette of a suit, quietly scanning the horizon, waiting, watching, still wired, still ready, still alive.